Would you allow, though, that perhaps a lot of the intrigue and a lot of the fandom towards basketball is somewhat similar to soccer, where it's such a beautiful product that people like to glamorize a great team and follow that team? And that's more of a draw than, say, if there's absolute parity and everybody's at a at a level of averageness. Obviously that's hard to prove, but that's my suspicion when it comes to basketball, that a glamour team like, say, the Miami Heat draws more interest to the league and bigger TV ratings than would an NBA reality like we had a short time ago when San Antonio was playing Cleveland in the finals and there weren't too many great teams out there. I feel like a few great teams is the rising tide that lifts all boats. And I know I sound like an NBA Republican, but I can't help it. That's the way I see it.
Right, that kind of gets. I mean, that's where I was thinking about this today. That's kind of where all this starts leading towards, right? Is the lockout and competitive balance and revenue sharing? It all kind of starts going towards that political perspective, right? Is whether or not it's like, I don't want to have any handouts. I don't want to help out somebody who can't help themselves, like Glenn Taylor, right? I don't want to help out somebody who can't help themselves. But the problem is again, we're talking about those middle teams that they aren't terrible. They're not run by horrible individuals. They haven't had bad management. Michael Redd's knees exploded. Like, this happens. They've Andrew Bogut has one of the most horrific injuries in NBA, not NBA history, but a pretty freaking bad one. These kind of things happen all the time, but they do tend to happen in situations where small markets can't recover from them, and I think that is part of the concern. Now, to your point about the Heat, sure, like the Heat are a massive, massive intake, and then the Lakers are a massive, massive intake. But if we start looking at other sports, you brought up soccer. I mean, look, where is the NBA played? It's played in America. And what's the most popular sport in America? It's the NFL. And the NFL is not built on glamour teams. The NFL is built upon the fact that, the Green Bay Packers have massive regional appeal. The Minnesota Vikings have massive regional appeal. The Jacksonville okay, never mind. But, in general, the Kansas City Chiefs have massive regional appeal.
That could be correlation isn't causation, and a false positive there, because a lot of different elements make the NFL popular, and I can't claim to know
Sure.
or isolate which ones there are, but my suspicion would be that
Sure.
the scarcity of games, the unpredictability of games, which makes for more gambling interest, and just the sheer violence, those are greater attributions for how popular the NFL is than the fact that the NFL has teams in places like Green Bay, which, extend out to media markets that aren't tiny, as tiny as Green Bay is. I think that the other factors are driving the NFL's popularity, and I would counter with the Major League Baseball is very popular, despite having the most haves and have-nots system out there. They seem to be doing quite well with a system that enables the Yankees to get to the World Series, every third or fourth time. So I'm not sure if I draw the same conclusions from looking at the NFL.
Sure, I mean that's a fair point, and yeah, we can argue all day about what the NFL does, but it doesn't really matter, right? So, I mean, here's a bigger question: what is the harm in trying to look for a system where more fans are involved? That's really my question. What's the harm in pursuing a system where more fans are actively involved versus I'm a
But wait a
Lakers fan,
second.
which means
Aren't
I buy one jersey and don't watch any
aren't
of their
more
games and
fans?
don't invest any money in the team locally, and I make no revenue outside of the fact that I'm a Laker fan because they're awesome. So all I'm really doing is helping ESPN, which is a national contract which goes elsewhere, and this totally ignores the fact that the Lakers' $5 billion TV deal doesn't get distributed in any way, shape, or form.
But more fans might live when we total it all up, and we could in the major media markets, depending on how we define major media markets. The LA media market, when we roll San Diego into it, is just south of 20 million people. I mean, that's a huge section of the country, and when you combine it with New York and Philadelphia and Chicago, I think it just makes more sense to have those markets be competitive, because that is where the people live. That is where the country lives. They live in big cities, and they're
We're
just
not talking about being
isn't
we're not
as
talking about
much
being
bang for your
competitive.
buck.
We're,
And
we're not talking about being competitive. We're talking about the gap of competitive. I'm not saying to put it into a system where, like, the playoffs every year, the finals are the Memphis Grizzlies versus the Indiana Pacers. Good God, even I don't want that. Those big teams need to be a part of it. I'm simply saying that for the overall health of the league and for more people being interested in basketball, which is what I care about, and for them spending money on basketball, which is what the owners care about, and for that driving, more resources into the sport to be able to do things like develop players better. The trickle down effect, if you want to start dropping in more relative terms that probably don't work in real life versus even basketball. But anyway, regardless, you've got those kind of things involved. I don't see what's the harm in trying to provide some sort of shortening of the gap, not to make big market teams uncompetitive, just to help out small market teams be more competitive. And
well,
I mean, I think
okay,
you're going to see
then
that
I have a question for you.
the franchise tag.
I have a question for you then. We both want the same thing here, which is for as many people to love the NBA as possible, and we're going about it with different ways. But I'm wondering, what would you do? What would you propose to make this league more competitive and draw more interest from the areas that you want to draw interest from? What would be your tangible solution?
I think revenue sharing is where it's got to start and end. I think that's one of the biggest issues, is the fact that, I mean, also sorry, this is a tangent. I'll get back to your original question, I promise. One thing I think is interesting is people say, I don't want bad ownership to succeed, right? So it's like, Glenn Taylor runs his team badly. If you want to win, run your team better. Problem with that is that bad ownership does succeed right now. Like, that's an inherent problem. Is Donald Sterling not only continues to exist in the NBA, but he thrives in it because of the fact that he's able to exist off of the market dynamics, which are stipulated upon the fact that the lack of revenue sharing. The TV deals is the biggest issue. The TV deals, like, that's got to get worked in and redistributed to a certain degree to be able to cover it. Either that, or there's got to be a better effort on the part of the NBA to manage, those other television deals. I think that's got to be part of the program. I don't like the idea of going to a franchise tag, from the perspective of, I like player movement. I'm a big fan of player movement. I'm actually worried about a hard cap. I'm actually concerned that some of the initiatives being built into this new CBA that they're working on are going to ruin chances for the small market teams, because they're going to do things like limit trade opportunities. They're going to do things like limit opportunities for, the franchise tag is that's another thing where I think that's a really dangerous territory to be able to keep them from, because I do think the players have a right to choose where they play. So I'm not necessarily hardline on all these things. I just think that the league needs to do a better job of trying to address that and working more, and honestly, not hoping that they can get the Lakers and the Celtics in all of these finals to have the big payday and then vanish off into nothingness.
Well, it makes for bad broadcasting, but we do agree on quite a few things, and such as increased revenue sharing and being anti-franchise tag. I'm gonna hold off on my push all Memphis residents into the sea because, well, mainly they're so far from the sea and it's a big expense. And thanks so much, Matt, for stopping by. It's been a great discussion. I'm gonna pass it off to Beckley and look forward to seeing you again on HoopSpeak Live.
Thank you.